Yeah, so again, just want to thank everyone. Some quick shout outs. Obviously, SB Wasp. Thanks to everyone, all the members, organizers, everyone just helps make this thing continue to thrive. I know we have probably some few people from the CS ULB, and then obviously my fellow Moose. Shout out to everyone. So thank you again for joining us here, and we'll start this off by kind of going over the box that we're going to do the walkthrough on, which is the Mr. Robot to capture the flag. I'll do a quick little history story, if you will, about this box. So the author of this box is a senior penetration tester for Rapid7. And the story is, and I can't confirm or deny this, but rumors is that this box was originally intended, it's a few years old. You can see here, it's actually, 4 years old, but the intention for this box was never really meant to be public. This box was meant to be a test during the interview process to, if you were applying to Rapid7 or the penetration testing team for us. This was one of many challenges, one of many, I'm sure, panel interviews. So anyway, so Leon developed this box, and he had gone through the ringer a few times, and then somehow it ended up on VulnHub, which is hilarious because Leon was not aware of this. And so one day he's doing an interview, and again, this is just all speculation. One day he's doing an interview, and someone's like, "Oh, you grabbed this box from VulnHub," and Leon was like, "What are you talking about? This, And he's like, "Oh yeah, this is a popular box on VulnHub," and he's like, "No, this is." He's like, "What do you like? What? I don't know what you're talking about." And so the guy showed him, and he's like, he was kind of like taking a step back. He's like, "Whoa, this really wasn't meant for public consumption. This was kind of supposed to be like a little bit of a test, if you will, of hey, what are some of the things that you would do in an engagement." So anyway, I thought that was pretty hilarious, but nonetheless, this is the box, Mr. Robot. It is a homage to the show for those of us who have maybe watched some, or if not all, of the episodes and seasons for Mr. Robot. If you haven't, I'd say at least check it out. There's some pretty cool things. It's one of the more real world types of shows that talk about hacking, or when there are hacking scenes or details. They kind of went out of their way to make sure that the things that they do and that they show and they talk about are actual types of attacks. When you see things being typed out on a screen, they're typically legitimate commands, as opposed to, Hollywood fluff like you'd see in like a CSI show or like a Mission Impossible or something, where it's just crazy over the top things that just don't even exist. So the show is pretty true to actual hacking scenarios, hacking types of different attacks, social engineering, lots of social engineering. So it's really cool. I mean, it's a good show otherwise. The drama and the story and the twists are awesome. But if you're looking for a show that kind of incorporates that but also has legitimate hacking scenes, then definitely a recommendation. So this is the box. It will be our final box of the year for these walkthroughs. There'll be more, but I know we're going to kick things off in January. Achar and a few other presenters have some talks they'd like to do, so I can stop hogging all the time doing these walkthroughs. But nonetheless, so this is like quote unquote, number 6 of the group, and then we'll probably circle back around next year for sure for some more boxes. I've already started on a bunch. So anyway, so basically it says there's 3 keys in different locations. And our goal is to find all of them, and each one is gets progressively difficult to find. And the tools that I used, CTF Toolkit is great. It's a great resource that has kind of various repositories of different types of tools you might use in doing some of these capture the flags or boot to roots. So specifically, nmap, nikto. We can sense there's a common theme here. These are typically used in web engagements and then some privesc. So, and then again, obviously right after, we'll take a bit of time maybe to field some questions and then jump into our next talk by Panda for the subdomain takeovers. So with that said, we will dig in. So I do have the box already running. And so essentially what we need to do is first and foremost, a good habit, if you don't already know, is just double checking what your own IP address is of the own, if you're running Kali in a VM, whatever that is, NAT bridge, whatever, however you have that set up, or if it's the host, whatever it is, just, it's always a good habit to just double check what your IP address is for your instance, whether it be Kali, whatever custom box, whatever it is you're using that you're hacking from. It's just a good idea to get the IP address for that. So you can kind of scratch that off the list whenever you're doing whatever enumeration. And so the next thing, speaking of enumeration, is typically we need to find the target. So it's on a network. We have no idea what the address is. I know that when this box is booted, it does not spit anything out to you other than Mr. Robot and log in. So it does not tell us what the IP address is. Normally in the real world environment, we probably wouldn't even see this anyway. But nonetheless, it's, sometimes it's easy to know what the IP address is because the box you boot up might tell you. But again, it's always just a good habit to form to do some scans to be able to enumerate that. So we will jump to nmap. And we'll just use the SN flag, which is essentially going to be a ARP or ping sweep, ICMP. I'm not sure exactly what it's doing here, but essentially it's not enumerating ports. It's just looking for assets that are up or replying to us. And then we'll get that list and then we'll figure out what's us and then what's the target. So we'll just do SN, and then we are going to do the subnet that we're on. So if I'm on 159, and if I've set things up correctly with the target box, they should be on the same network. And so we'll find out here, making sure. We'll do the /24 scan, and this should only come back with things that are in NAT. I'm running Kali in NAT, and I'm running the target box in NAT. So it's pretty obvious here that if we know this is us, that this is going to be our target. So that's one easy way. There are a ton of tools out there, NetDiscover, and there's a few other ARP scanners and sweepers and things like that to assess the target or to at least figure out what's on the network. Again, I run them in NAT if you're asking why, because if I run them in bridge, I'm going to pick up a lot of other assets. If I run it in bridge mode, then I'm going to pick up everything else on my home network. So that's going to be probably a little bit more difficult unless you have everything mapped and labeled on your home network, and then you know what doesn't belong or what's new. So that's one of the reasons why I run in NAT mode, is that these are the only two boxes running in NAT mode. So it makes the output easier to kind of process. So now we know what our target is. So right off the bat, I'm going to go over to the CTF toolkit and at least just add this target to just make things a lot easier when I start copying and pasting, some of the things that we're gonna be doing. So I'll just put that in there. And that was, what the heck was that? 219. And so we can see as we enter that information, anywhere that makes sense for there to be a target, it should auto-populate that. So it just makes the copying, like I said, copy and pasting a lot easier. So we have that out of the way. So now what we can do is we can at least go in maybe back to our enumeration things and figure out like, what are some things that we do? We need to first figure out some ports and things like that. So we definitely want to look over at nmap and then figure out, there's a few examples here. This is by no means like a full list of what nmap can do. That's a very, very massive and powerful application. So for now, I think we'll just probably stick to something similar to what this is kind of doing. This might be a little bit overkill for us, but I'm going to grab it anyway. And then just kick this off against our target. So now that we know what our target is, now we need to run an actual scan against our target to try and enumerate what is actually open and running on the target. So right off the bat, we can see at least there's a couple ports that's open there. Looks like we're getting 80, 443. These are kind of common. You could probably go out on a limb and say it's a Linux box, and 22 will probably be open. It's typical, for SSH for these things. And so while this is running, we're gonna, again, for these walkthroughs, I typically don't quite go over everything that I tried or that you could try. I mean, we could spend days doing that. So I typically just stick to like what worked in the end and like the direct path to kind of solve this stuff. So while this is running, which this looks like it's going to take forever, so I'm not going to, I'll wait a little bit. But anyway, while it's running, we know we have port 80 open. So before we start enumerating that, it's at least good to just go over there quickly to just verify, like, is there an actual, application running? Oops. So we'll just check real quick and see if we get anything. So sure enough, this looks interesting. It looks like we're seeing some machine boot. And so it's a pretty cool little, I don't even know what you call this, script, movie, whatever. So it looks like right off the bat, we're like, we're off to the races here. I went over and typed in the address of the box, and here we are now seeing what looks like, someone logged in. We have like a message to us. We have what appears to be, what looks like an actual prompt. So the cool thing about this box is you could spend a lot of time in here, and it's actually just well put together, and it's really cool. This is a legitimate terminal in a sense that you can actually type in some commands, and then you will get some feedback. There's no audio that I'm aware of, but there's definitely some interesting, images, movies that are I think from the actual show. I know this clip is clearly, but it's really cool. It's very interesting that this definitely feeds into the narrative of the show. So just an FYI, I don't believe there's any spoilers in this, but nonetheless, as you can see, you can kind of go through those commands and then kind of iterate through each one. So we can, again, now that we're back here, we're like, oh man, I don't remember, you could, start the whole show all over again. But if you just type help, you're back to the commands. So we know there's a website running. Like, there's no question about that. So now we can kind of go back to our enumeration. It looks like nmap finally finished, and it looks like, we got our 22 is, again, we figured that was going to end up showing up. We know 80 works. We got 443. And I think that's it for this box. So again, typically while things are running, depending on your skill level, you might try and, automatically jump into a few things and start doing some other enumeration while you're waiting for some other things to kind of wrap up. If you're new, maybe you kind of just take things like one at a time, wait for this to kind of finish, and then kind of look over the results. But again, we're going to take this direct approach here. So we know that there's a website running, and now we're going to start reaching some tools that are common to start enumerating web apps, if you will. And so a very common one we'll touch real quick is what web. And that's just kind of going to enumerate, think of like what the application is running on. So you'll see here the output that we get, and the output that we get will kind of make sense of figuring out like what it is that it does. So it tells us we got a 200 OK, so that means that there's a landing page, if you will. We get some information. It's using HTML5. It's running on Apache, and a few other things. Obviously, the more complex the application, the more information you're going to get back about the application. So it's handy. Sometimes it yields awesome information. Sometimes there's really nothing that is there's nothing in there that it's giving us that's going to lead us down any other paths. But I just wanted to show that. Another very common one, obviously, is nikto. And nikto, again, is another web application sort of enumeration tool, but it's mostly focused on any types of vulnerabilities. And again, all of these kind of have different uses. So what web kind of tells us what's running. nikto will tell us, hey, do we know if there's any vulnerable versions of anything? So we're going to go put that in, and we'll get some feedback here. And this essentially is just going to say, hey, by some of the information that we're able to retrieve, versions of PHP or versions of Apache, versions of other frameworks, maybe it will pick up some common files, and it will tell us like, hey, you might want to look at these things, or it appears these things are happening or running on the application. So it's sort of doing an assessment from the outside, because that's where we are right now. We're on our Kali instance, kind of poking and prodding against our target, which is the Mr. Robot box. So we're going to wait for this to go through. And while that's running, we can probably hop over to here. Obviously, we want to be taking notes, so it'd probably be good to like maybe copy this, put them into some notes somewhere. The CTF toolkit has, a crude area to put some notes if you want. But it's always just recommended to please get in the habit of taking notes. You're definitely going to regret not doing that and having to either start over whenever you go to re-engage with this box. Or you might end up doing something that works and you're like, oh, I wish I had written that down and remembered what I did, because I could, there's going to be numerous times where that same trick, it will help you in other engagements. So while this is running, we're going to make some room to run dirb. Dirb is the next tool we're going to run to enumerate the web application. Again, we're still in enumeration phase. And that's kind of how the CTF toolkit is laid out. We have all our enumeration, well, not all, but a good amount of enumeration scripts. After the life cycle, I call it, is then we start working on actual exploiting things. And then from there, we work on, privesc. And then it's kind of rinse and repeat, because if we've then gained entry to the box, then this sort of thing starts all over again. Now we're doing enumeration, but from inside. And now we're trying to run exploits from inside and do privesc from inside. So just again, like a hint or tip, if you will, of the kind of idea of the life cycle, of what I like to call it, the life cycle, the hacker's life cycle. So that's still running. So we're going to run dirb. Dirb is, again, another enumeration tool. And what dirb tries to do is enumerate the different paths that may exist, like a crawler, if you will, the different paths that may exist on the website. Because remember, when we visited here, I mean, sure, we have these menus, but we don't know if there are other places on the site that may exist. We don't know if there's hidden areas of the website. So dirb is kind of a cool tool to help kind of enumerate what paths may exist. It runs off of a list or dictionary, and it just has thousands of very, very common paths that one might come across on a web application, like slash, admin, or slash login, or slash home, or just, that type of idea. And it's going to try and go through the word list for that. So we're going to use just dirb. We do need the protocol for dirb. We'll put in our address. And you'll see here, it's going to start finding some things fairly quickly. But again, what this is doing is you can kind of see it happening in real time. It's just going to start trying to guess. And depending on the response that it gets back from the web server, it'll kind of log it for you. So right off the bat, it thinks that it found a directory, /o. It thinks it found another directory. It's just going to keep doing that until it exhausted the list and exhausted the endpoints. And then it will circle back around and then go into this directory and then kind of start all over again. So you can see what it's doing. It's going through its list. You can kind of see it's in alphabetical order of all the different types of paths that have just been collected that exist in the real world for real applications. Again, none of these look surprising. You might just find these on typical websites, these paths. So I'm gonna let it run for a little bit. There's a few areas that are going to help us once it eventually gets to it. Again, your mileage may vary depending on your system resources and network speed and all that stuff, how long or how quickly or how long these may take to run. Let's see where we're at. So it looks like this has a little bit longer to run before we get to some good information. Again, I've already run this, so I kind of have an idea of what we're looking for. But essentially, again, we're getting some feedback on some things right off the bat. We could say, oh, we could check out this path, and we could go over here and look at this. And these are all pages that supposedly exist, or at least directories that appear to exist for this application. We can see over on the right, nikto still running. And let's see, so far, it looks like it's found like an index, it found a path. So, you're going to find some overlap in what nikto and dirb find. Again, nikto really isn't looking for like all these different paths and endpoints. It's just, it's mainly looking to try and see if there's any vulnerabilities. And in doing that, it might also discover some paths. So like this is really good here. It looks like it's found a WordPress login. So since that directory exists, there's probably a really good chance that we may come across a WordPress site, or at least a login or some content. So again, right now we're still enumerating. We're still just trying to figure out everything about our target. We know that there's 3 ports open, 22, 80, and 443. And currently we're focusing on 80. And again, that's just to sort of to kind of do a direct approach in this walkthrough. So let's see where we're at on this. We got to log in. So it shouldn't be too much time before we get to some more interesting information that will help us. So this is still running, but it does appear that it's at least found a WordPress login. So we're going to kind of file that away. Those are always fun. And there's a ton of options, and we're definitely going to explore them. And we'll wait for dirb. It should be coming up here in a little bit on some things that are going to help us even further. As Pando mentioned before in our last walkthrough, obviously there's tons of things we can be doing while all this stuff is running. So this is about to finish though, but there are definitely some go-to places. Again, before we even started assessing the web, it's always good just to check just to make sure there is something running and not necessarily worry about wasting a bunch of time and just going through the motions of things because you want to go through the motions. That's great, get in the habit of doing those, but at some point you'll start realizing like, oh, I don't need to do this, or I don't need to even run this tool because this isn't necessary, doesn't exist. So I'm going to stop it here. And again, there's, each tool has usually a specific use. Don't use a tool just to use it. You kind of want to be efficient. You want to try and figure out the best tool for the job, and there usually is one. Kali is a plethora of them. But one of the good things we got back from this scan is it appears there's a robot.txt. Very common in web applications, definitely common in any CTF or boot to root where there's a web application involved, for this file to be leveraged to drop some hints. Normally it's there to tell a crawler, hey, please don't log these. Please don't show the world that these exist. When someone does a search for my website, please don't tell the world that there's a login area, for that. So that's kind of the idea for this file. So normally there's like a disallow area, but we can see right off the bat, like we're given two things here that, this is pretty obvious, like this isn't normal for a robots.txt file to have. So right off the bat, we're in good shape. We know that there's 3 flags, if you will. This appears to be the first one. So this is a text file, or at least a link to it. And then this appears to be, I'll call it a dictionary. But nonetheless, it looks like, we got a hit for robots.txt and we went there, and it does appear that there's 2 entries, if you will. So the easiest thing to do is, we got to try and figure out, we got to grab these, or you can just, we could try just copying this for now and then just paste this here. Let's see what that gives us. So we get this. You can try deciphering this, but it's very common for flags to just be some random, like a hash. Normally in like a CTF challenge, you're given a hash, and that's what you're actually submitting for the actual challenge to get the points. It might be in a format, maybe it's a phrase, but it's very common to just have a hash. So we don't really need to worry about decoding this, although maybe later on there's some things we might need to decode. But for this is technically flag 1 of 3. So we can kind of check that off, our list. If we're over here, we're doing like a list or something, and we want to, notate some flags, like flag 1 or something. We can spell, and we can cross that off. We got that one, whatever. But just again, just keep notes, keep tracks of things. So we know that we got 1 of 3, so that's good. And we go back here, we're also given this, right? So again, usually things are presented to us for a reason. So we could do a wget, or we can just put this in our browser and see if we can start some download. We want to try and grab that file. So right off the bat, we're presented with, we can save this, which is what we want to do. It'll go to our downloads. I already have it, but nonetheless, that's the process you want to do. Or again, you could just do a wget from our terminal from wherever you want to, and just put in that path of this, and we can grab it that way as well. Let me see where I am. I think I'm just doing, oh, whoops. So we could just do like and then paste this here. You can see I don't have it in this directory, I have it in another directory, but you can also paste this, do that, and then grab the file that way. And now we can see that we have it. So there's multiple ways to get it. Nonetheless, we probably want that for we're going to need that. So the next thing we want to do so we can move forward with, we were told that there's what we believe there's maybe a WordPress, site. So we believe that there's like a WP, there's a login area. And anytime we see that, we want to definitely head over there and figure out what's going on with that. So we can do that. So we will go back to over here and see if there is, and sure enough, there is a WordPress login. So as soon as we know that there's like a WordPress site running, that's going to start like triggering some like alarms and bells of like, okay, there's a ton of things we can start doing here. Let's see, let's go into, and we're going to go into our, did I put it in word list? Maybe it's downloads. I grabbed that before. Yeah. Okay. So our dictionary that we were given is in this directory. I like to, when I run commands to run tools that use word lists and things like that, I like to run them in the directory that those things exist in. It just makes the path a lot kind of easier. And that'll make sense here in a second. So we know that that there's a WordPress site running. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, let's run wpscan. And for those that don't know, wpscan is essentially an application, a tool that will try and enumerate things about a WordPress website. And some of those things can be users, can be templates, what else? Plugins, all things that may give us more information about the application, or at least the fact that it's running WordPress. There may be some things that are just vulnerable within WordPress that we might be able to leverage. So the first thing we want to do real quick is we want to try and enumerate the users just to see if we can get a list of, do we know if there's any users that are available that this wpscan can find. So we'll just use actually just to make this easier, we can come over here. We're still in enumeration, web apps. We can scroll down to see if we can find a wpscan. Here it is right here. So U to enumerate users, E for enumerate, and then A for all plugins, all templates. So for now, we're just going to grab this real quick. We'll just paste this in, make things a little bit easier and quicker for us. And so what this is going to do is it's going to go out to that site. And actually, I think for this, we're going to need to, we'll try this first. And sometimes if it may not like just the root path or address to the site, it might want you to put in like where the login exists or the WordPress content folder. For now, I think we can have results though if we just run this and see what we get back. Sure, we'll update. So what this is going to do is it's going to go to the application, and basically there's a few different ways you can try and enumerate users. One of the easiest ways is by looking at the pages of the blogs and then seeing who posted the blogs. If someone posted something, that has to be like a user or username. So we didn't find anything doing that approach, so maybe there's nothing there, no content. That's fine. There are some other ways we can start manually trying to assess users. We know there's a user. There has to be users that has to get created when you install WordPress. So for us, what we can do is we can kind of start trying to do some manual ways to kind of fuzz something. So if I just put in admin, and then I'll just put in admin, and I'll try and log in, we get this error. We get an invalid username. Now, it's just the average person, they might think, okay, that's maybe I have the wrong password or wrong username or whatever. But if you put a correct username in with an incorrect password, you actually will get a different message. So right off the bat, you start thinking, again, when you know that you can put in an incorrect username and get one response versus a correct username and get another response, then the next step is, okay, well then how do I get a correct username, much less the password? So we think we might have a password in that list that we were given, in the robots.txt file. It mentioned that the fsociety.dic. So there's probably a password in there. Again, we're given that for a reason. So the next thing is we got to try and figure out, like, okay, what's a username? And again, with the theme of the box, And this kind of it being a very common scenario of characters. You know, we did a box a while ago, and it was a Rambo theme, and there were users, you know, from the show, from the movie. There were locations that were used that were kind of hints throughout. So, you know, whenever there's like themes, you know, there's like Harry Potter boxes and you name it, there's a theme for it, you know, on Vulnhub or somewhere out there. And so those are usually done that way for a reason, part of the story, or in this case, you know, usernames. So if you're a fan of the show, or if not, you can just, a quick Google search will tell you that there's a few main characters. You know, we have I would say the main character is Mr. Robot. And then obviously there's Elliot. Who else? There's Darlene. There's a ton of characters. So, you know, again, without telling you all the ones that I tried, we can just try the main one of the main usernames, and I'll just put in password. We know when we put in an incorrect username, we got this. Let's try and figure out if maybe this is a correct username. Aha, see, we get something different here. It appears that when we get a correct username, we get this type of error message that the password we entered for the username is incorrect. So now we're dead certain that this is a valid username. And again, the reason why maybe wpscan wasn't able to find it is because maybe this user never posted something, never posted a blog or any content for that matter. That's typically how WordPress scan will get usernames. And then maybe there was no admin. Maybe the first, you know, when you install this, you know, you don't have to name it admin. You can name it anything. So nonetheless, we're pretty sure we have a username. Now we got to figure out the password. But again, logic, we're pretty sure that we were probably given that password in that dictionary list, in that list that we were given. So again, the good thing with WordPress and wpscan has kind of a built-in cracker, like a login, like word list, if you will. So we can actually leverage the username that we believe we have just by the error response. We're pretty certain Elliot is a username, and we were given a list, so we can actually tell wpscan to essentially with that username, and then to go through the list, iterate through the list that we were given, see if there's a match, and then from there we can log into the application to start doing some enumeration, some privesc, something to try and get onto the actual box. So I'm just going to paste this, and then I think I will have to change. Actually, no, I don't. Yeah, I'll just paste this and change the IP. I could actually grab it from CTF toolkit, wpscan. We can see here one of the things in the exploit area will be the wpscan for that, but I'm just going to grab this and then copy and then paste. And then I'll change the IP because the IP has changed since the last time I booted that box. But essentially what this is going to do is it's going to say, hey, run nmap against, or not nmap, sorry, run wpscan with to this endpoint, which is where you need to log in, with a password list of the one we were given, with this username, and with a whole bunch of threads to try and do this thing fairly quickly. So what that's going to do is not work. Because I got to fix this. 1 second. Oh, because I copied from my notes the actual piece of this should work. So this is going to go through real quick. Just fire up wpscan. It's going to grab the username Elliot. It's going to go to that endpoint. It's going to take that list, and it's going to try and see from that list. You can see here there are quite a few passwords. It's going to see if any of them in that list work, if they're gonna if we're gonna basically get a match and try and log in. So it's trying to log Elliot in, and this shouldn't take long. Let's see if it tells me how long it took. I forget, it shouldn't take too long. So it's going through the list of whatever was in there, and it's gonna try and enumerate and then guess. Elapsed time, when I originally did it, it took 4 seconds. So maybe it's running a little slower this time. We'll wait, but it shouldn't be too much longer. But nonetheless, we were given that file for a reason. In that file, it does appear that there is a password that does match for user Elliot. And it looks like I'll still wait for this. If it starts dragging on, I'll just stop it and I'll just show you the password that it finds in the list. It doesn't need to run through the entire list. Another trick you can do, I mean, I've mentioned this a few times, is a common trick that I'll do is I'll actually take any list that I have and I'll reverse it. And so you can use a tac command in Linux, which is like cat, but backwards. And then forward that out to another file. I usually just call it like, reverse, append that to the file name. And so essentially what that does is that takes the list and then flips it. And a lot of times I'll run 2 attacks at once, one from kind of the top and then one from the bottom, which is really now the top again, but in reverse. Because, it sucks if you have to wait an hour for something to go through because, the author of the box wanted to troll you and put the password at the end to make sure that you had to run the entire, scanner. So a lot of times, it's not a bad idea to flip the list and then run it that way. And then again, I usually run them at the same time. And sometimes you'd be surprised, that the password appears to be towards the end of the list, just to, I don't know, to build suspense maybe. So let me copy this. At some point, we will get this output. I'll just copy it. And then let me quit this. And let me see if I can paste it. Yeah, at some point we'll get this here. It will basically say we got a valid combination found. And so what that's saying is that with the username Elliot that you supplied us, and then with this password, this combo here, that's in that list we were given, it appears that matches. It appears that we can use that as the password to log in as Elliot. So again, your mileage may vary depending on resources and a lot of other things. It may be quick. Again, the first time I ran this, it literally happened pretty instantly. So I guess things are a little bit slower this time. But nonetheless, the password is in that file. So now what we can do is we can just head on back over to here, and we can paste in the password that we found in the list that WordPress scan confirmed to us. We can log in. And sure enough, boom, we are in the dashboard, if you will, or the user management area or admin area of WordPress. If you're not familiar, most CMSs like this have some sort of dashboard administration area, which is how you actually administer and maintain the website, pages, updates, content, all that stuff. So this is great. We're making progress. We went from essentially being a spectator to finding out that a WordPress site was running. And now we've, some manual testing, which you're going to have to do sometimes. We found that Elliot was a user just by knowing how WordPress works, or just by playing with the login. We saw that we got a different login. And again, now that you know that, that's something that, you should put in your kind of Batman tool belt of all the tools, and know that whenever you're presented with the login, the first thing you should do is just try and log in and see what the error is. And then maybe if you get a correct username, or if you have the username, log in and see if you get a different result, and that can kind of help confirm that is a valid username. So as many challenges before that we've done through, as many walkthroughs that we've done through, there's a ton of things we can do, but we're going to kind of just dive right in on the obvious kind of go-to, which is we're going to try and upload a reverse shell. And one of the easy ways to do that is to kind of go through our, I think it's appearance, and we'll go into themes, and we can try the editor for the current theme that we're doing, which is this 2015. And we can adjust the 404. You can see that I've already done this. Typically, this area here would be full of PHP code that talks about the 404 page that would typically exist if the site was had not been modified yet. You can see here that I've already put in the kind of one-liner reverse shell, and this is a very, very common PHP one-liner for a reverse shell. Obviously, PHP needs to be running on the application, but we know that WordPress does, many CSMs do, so this is pretty much going to be a good option here that we should have, good luck for this. And again, tons of Google searches can show this. You can also grab it from the CTF toolkit. And I think it's maybe persistence, but it's definitely in here about giving this one-liner. Obviously, you're going to change from the default Kali IP, which is what's currently put in there on the site, to the IP address of your Kali instance. So again, you can see here that we're not going to put the target address in here because this is a reverse shell. This is going to try and connect back to our Kali instance. So whenever you're working with reverse shells, you're going to want to edit them to either one, make sure the port that you're going to listen back on is a port that you can use. Most importantly, though, you need to know your own IP address because this is going to try and connect back to us over this address. So if this was a target address, it wouldn't work because it would try and connect back to itself. But we know that for me, my Kali IP is this .130. So it's going to try and connect back to my Kali instance over port 1337. The port can be anything you want. Just make sure that when we fire up the listener, which is what we're going to do next, that they match. And again, make sure that you know what your IP is. We got a question from Char. Any reason to pick 404 versus something else? So technically, we could edit anything. We just, one, have to know how to get to it. Meaning that if we edit any of these other pages, we got to know like, well, how do we get to it? Because we have to visit the page to activate our PHP script. Because remember, this is now a script that's going to live at this endpoint, if you will. So technically, we could probably put them in anything as long as we knew or had some way to navigate in the URL to get to that page. Another common reason, or I'd say like a good habit of a 404 is, we're suspending disbelief on the attacks that we're doing and how noisy we're being. But typically, we don't want to be found. We don't really want to set off any like obvious alarms. So sure, and we could upload a plugin that gives us the uploadability, which is very common for WordPress sites, and we could upload our shell that way. Another way is we could start editing these things. But if we're editing content that might be actually seen on the site, that's going to be pretty obvious. Where someone's expected to read a blog and they see this there instead. Like that's obviously a dead giveaway. So part of it is the ease of executing the script, and then part of it is in some way, shape, or form keeping in mind that we're trying to be somewhat under the radar, here. So that's kind of my reasoning of why I picked the 404. Plus, it's just common in a lot of walkthroughs. You'll see people just tend to pick the 404. So this is our reverse shell. So, I don't really need to worry about updating the file, but this is, once you clear out all the code that's here and you're only left with this, then you would typically update the file. And then now this is what you'd be left with. So if you were to go to any other of these, navigation items and then come back, we should see that this is still here, that this is now has been uploaded to the server. This is now part of the WordPress site. So now we got to figure out, one, where this is, which I'll show you guys. But the other thing is remember, this is going to connect back to us on port 1337. So we need to figure out a way to, what I call it, to catch it. So one of the more common ways to do that is to set up what we call a listener. And the listener essentially is listening in on the port that we picked. In this case, I left it default, which is the 1337, but it's going to essentially say, hey, I'm going to listen to any communications coming in on that port. And for that, we can just do NC for netcat, and we can do -L, V, and P. I honestly don't remember what all these are, other than I think L is listen and P is port. I'm good, but it's just a habit I've gotten into. Feel free for anyone else to chime in if you're familiar with a lot of the NC commands. But nonetheless, this is what we're going to run. And then we're just going to put in 1337, and essentially that's just telling my Kali Linux to say, hey, just start listening in on this. So it's just listening, and hopefully once we trigger the reverse shell, we'll get some feedback here. So to trigger the reverse shell, we're going to want to go to this endpoint. I'll copy and paste here, which we just need after the primary IP address. And paste. And so this is the path we can see here. We don't need that twice. So we can see here that we're the IP address of the target box, and then WordPress content, and then themes. And then if you remember correctly, we're in the 2015 theme. That's the default theme. There's many different themes come with these these installations. This just happens to be 2015 that we were editing, and then 404. So when I go here, I really shouldn't see much, but you can see here that it's kind of doing this like waiting thing. It's doing something, and that something is this. Now we can see we are connected. This is a very common technique. This is how you typically, what I call catching our reverse listener. And so that's exactly what we've done. We've uploaded our single line reverse PHP shell onto WordPress, and then we triggered it when we went to that endpoint that activated that script. And because we're listening to catch it, we can see that now we're now connected to it. So now we have an actual shell on the server hosting the WordPress site. So again, now we've gone from spectating to just poking around. We found out that with a manually checking usernames and then getting that password list, we were able to log into the WordPress. But now we've kicked it up a notch. Now we're no longer in WordPress. We are actually on the web server, or the server itself that's running Apache, that's running the WordPress site. So we are now literally in the box. So again, some common things that one does is, like, who am I? Okay, we're Damon. Okay, well, that's interesting. We'll figure out maybe like, where are we? Makes sense. That's where we put our shell. But at least we can get some sort of like structure of things and kind of where we are. Maybe like what's in this whole thing. Like, again, going back to a WordPress site, you're going to see lots of PHP files. And again, to skip the plethora of things that we could be doing, to start enumerating and figuring, the lay of the land and how to exploit things and privilege escalation and all that stuff. The first thing we'll do is just at least try to get like a simple, a better shell, or a bash shell, if you will. So we're going to go to our trusty Python script here, and at least, okay, so it looks like at least we have some sort of better shell to navigate. It gives us a little bit more wiggle room. And now we can kind of proceed with trying to do some more privilege escalation, if you will, on what we can do to gain access, or at least just to start kind of poking around to figure out, like, where do we go from here. So obviously the first thing we maybe want to do is go to just the root WordPress area. So we can see here that we're in this content, so we can just maybe like backspace ls, see what's in here. Nothing much. I kind of like just to walk backwards. Nothing out of the ordinary here. And then, we kind of fall into the WordPress area, and, there's tons of things we could check. The config file for sure. But, this is definitely not something that comes with a default WordPress installation. So, we'll probably want to cat that out. And I think maybe with the shell, let's see if we can tab. Nope, can't tab. So this is kind of like, I don't want to say a rabbit hole, but it's basically like you will never guess this file name is something that clearly like dirb or nikto would never pick up. Like, this just isn't something that it would guess. So there's kind of, a little play or trolling happening there. And then clearly we opened it up, and there's nothing here other than it's saying, hello, person who found me. So a little bit of humor, but it doesn't really help us in, some flags and things like that. One of the first things, we want to do is just some basic commands. And I don't have a password, so that ain't going to work. One of the things that we want to do is try and figure out what we can do as this user, or what things we may have access to that maybe we may be able to escalate our privilege. And I didn't fully copy that. Oh. And you'll notice that when you have these types of shells, clearly it's not like a normal shell. So like, this is not going to work. But let me paste this correctly. You'll notice that as you try and tab to autocomplete, the simple things in life, like being able to backspace or things like, you won't have that. So there's a question, what kind of shell is it? I believe it's the Python PTY shell, which is, I guess, in the TTY shell family. I just know that it's better than what you're given just as the generic bash reverse, but it's clearly not as good as something that would be as if you were a normal user on the box. And again, as you saw, as I tried to backspace, we're presented with like this type of characters as opposed to actually backspacing. Or if I was to press up to try and get history, I would again be presented with this sort of character output as opposed to it actually cycling through. That's just the nature of this type of reverse remote shell, if you will, versus actually logging onto the box. But we can't SSH into the box because we don't have any credentials. And even if we did, we kind of don't really need to. I mean, it might make things a little bit easier, but we're already on, the box, so to say. So one of the things we can do is we can run this find command, which is very, very common. It's on the CTF toolkit to just sort of give us what list of things with the SUID that's been set. And that essentially can give us access to some things maybe with elevated privileges. One of the things that you could quickly do is go over to the CTF toolkit and see if maybe some of these things are in the list, or for a full list of things we can do, we can just go to the GTF obins and start looking through this list, which is an amazing list repository of different binaries you can run to try and elevate privileges. So we can see here that, out of this, we'll just say that nmap is a very common one that we could run to essentially try and give us elevated privileges. However, just to save time, that doesn't work. So what we can do is we can try and basically, figure out where are some other places that we can go to try and enumerate more of the of the box, because we really haven't gone anywhere. We looked in the WordPress, we saw kind of that file there that was just kind of poking fun. But again, the common places we're always going to check is home, and that's just the kind of de facto thing we do when we're running these boxes. Always check home, always check root. I can probably guarantee you that permission is going to be denied here. Yeah, so that's a gimme. But I can guarantee you that we're probably going to want to get to that directory at some point. But we gotta do some privilege escalation first. So we can see there's a directory here called robot. We're going to go into there, and sure enough, it looks like we found the second flag, and then we also found some password file. So as we would normally do with these files, we're going to try and cat out just to make sure. If I get in type, but we're going to find out shortly we don't have permissions to open this. So shoot. So we found it, but we kind of didn't. We found it, but we can't get into it. So that's part of the challenge. But again, there is this password file thing. So let's maybe cat and see if we have better luck there. And sure enough, we do. We have what appears to be an MD5 password, possibly for user robot. So we are pretty sure this is an MD5 hash. Whenever we see like a user colon or name colon something, we're pretty. It's usually indicative of this thing here being a password. So we're pretty sure. And if you're not sure, just as you do more and more of these, you can start making some assumptions. I know it's sometimes bad to assume things, but hindsight, the fact that I've solved this, I know that this is in fact a hashed password. But the author is trying to give you some hints without blindly giving you the password. I mean, the thing is named password, and there's -MD5, so we're pretty sure that this is the password for robot, and it's been hashed into the MD5 hash. So a couple things we could do here. We could take this offline, right? I could copy this hash, and I could take it offline to like hashcat or John and start going through all kinds of word lists. And maybe eventually you'd get it. Or the cool thing is with modern technology, and everything is pretty accessible on the web now. We could just venture on over to CrackStation, which is, I believe, just an online version of the CrackStation leak database with just like a bajillion passwords that have been sort of hashed already for you. And you can just kind of enter it in here and just see if you get a hit. So what we'll do is we'll take this hash. And again, you can take this offline. You don't have to use this website. I'm just doing this for for time's sake. But you could take this offline. Let's just say you have the RockU list, or you have other word lists that you've made or that you found, and you could essentially run this hash against that list offline and see if you get a hit. But again, for us, we're just going to bring it over to here. We're going to paste it. We're going to tell it that we are not a robot. And I got a question: is this safe for general use? Should one use it for real testing? Not a CTF, or why not? That's a very good question. We don't know. We don't control this website. We kind of know what it does. Apparently it takes a hash and then tries to match it to some online database of passwords. So I think, what maybe Panda is alluding to is, let's just say you've created some things personally. Like, do these things get stored? Does this search get stored somewhere? Is now this hash now part of the CrackStation library? And now that I've hashed some personal password of mine, and I'm trying to see if CrackStation, can guess it, does it now have that? So I don't know. Those are great questions. I would obviously I would always use caution. I would recommend probably not putting anything personal into any website that you don't control, or that you thoroughly know, like, what the site is doing with that information. So a very good point. For CTFs and things like that, for sure, 100%, I would be using them. Oh crap, I was too late. What does this thing want us to do? It wants us to find some boats. Let's see what's that. That looks like a boat. We got a boat maybe, and a boat. I think those are all the boats. Let's see if this is happy. Cool. All right. So right off the bat, boom, we got a hit. Sure enough, it was an MD5, and here's the password. I don't know if you'd ever would have guessed that. And sure, maybe that might be in the RockU list or other lists, but nonetheless, this is the clever password that our user decided to put for Elliot. So now remember, we're trying to escalate our privilege. We were user daemon, but we found a directory called robot. And in that directory, we were given some file that apparently was a hash password of an MD5 of the password. And it turns out that the CrackStation has this in its library. It's hashed it, and how it finds it is it compares this hash to another hash, and if that matches, then it basically says, okay, well, what did we hash to get that? And it turns out that they had at some point hashed this, which gave them this, which matched this. And so that's kind of how this all works. It's not actually cracking this. It's not deciphering or decoding. This is a one-way trip when you kind of make these. So it's literally like a guessing game of what it's doing, of just a list of things it has. It hashes it, and again, it matches to what we presented it. So cool. Now we have a password. So this is awesome. So now what we can do is we can sudo up, if you will. So we can come back over to here. And we can now, because we are still daemon. So now what we can do is we can just say, okay, let's su to change users. And we're fairly certain the user is robot, because we're in his we're in a directory called robot. And then from here, we should be presented with the password. And that password was A through Z, basically. And sure enough, boom. Now we are robot. So we're making progress. We went from a nobody that was just browsing the page. Now we are somebody. We came in as daemon. We got some hints. We saw that there's this flag, this key here, but we couldn't cat it. We couldn't get to it, but we saw that it's there. So we're going to basically, we want to revisit this to see if there's any hint in there, or is it just, a hash to tell us that we got that one. And again, I can't autocomplete because of how I'm entering it. Technically, I could exit out and actually do a proper SSH, but to save time, we're already on the box. I'm already this user. But technically, now that we have a username and password, I could SSH from Kali into the box as user robot with that password. But again, we're already here. And so sure enough, we got another hash. So again, we're fairly certain this was key, or quote unquote flag 2. That we got. Again, we don't need to decipher these. This is just the hash of the flag, so we're good. So 2 down, 1 to go. Now, again, we're going to pretty much rinse and repeat some of the things that we've already done to try and gain privileges to this box. Again, another very common one is this. We do have the password for for robot. So we'll put that in there and then see. But it looks like, sorry, that robot can't actually run sudo on this box. So that's good to know. We can't run sudo. So if we're trying to do anything with escalation, sudo is out of the question. We're not going to be able to put that in our commands. But we can still run, there's a few other things we can run. We can try and run old faithful here to our find command for our SUID and let this guy go through and then see if we get any other hits. And so we get the same list it looks like from before, except for this time we're a different user. And maybe this time we'll have better luck trying some of these. So again, typically what we would do is we would just go, through the GTFO bin list, and then kind of just go down the list of like, okay, is there a shell or a sudo up for ping without using sudo? Can I leverage mount to gain privileges? Can I, leverage any of these things? So we're definitely going to focus on nmap. There's a interactive shell, if you will, within nmap that can potentially lead to privilege escalation. So we'll head back on over to our GTFO bins. This is in alphabetical order. We'll scroll down to nmap, and we can see nmap has a ton of things we can do, or what it can do, or what we can do with nmap. So shell, we're definitely interested in shell. So we're going to look at this one. And we noticed that we can also, sudo, but that's kind of out of the question because we found out that we can't do any type of sudo. That's just not in our permission. So I can't run this, which is pretty much the same thing, just with sudo. I can't run, this. There's just some things that we're just not going to be able to run. Thankfully, though, there appears to be something we can run without typing in the word sudo in front of it that may give us may elevate our privilege, if you will. So we're going to just literally type in as what it said to type in, nmap, and then it's like -- interactive. And welcome to interactive mode. Press H, enter for help. We're not going to press H, though. We're going to do what it says, which is if you can kind of see here in the background, the transparency, or if you can't, we're going to type in bang sh. And we're going to see what that guy does for us. So bang sh. Okay, and this is interesting. So it doesn't appear that we're user robot anymore. We're user pound. Let's see who we are. What do you know? We are root now. So leveraging a function of nmap, an exploit, if you will, and because we were given the ability to be able to use nmap, as we found here, which is associated with like a pseudo type of user or a root user or a more elevated user, but we're granted access to this application, and the application is tied to or is given permission to run at a elevated state, if you will. So without us having elevation, we're able to leverage a binary that does have elevation to get us elevated in our users. So now we are root. As all things, we tried maybe to go to root, and sure enough, it looks like there's a third flag here. So we're going to just cat that just to verify, get in the habit. Sometimes it's a hint, sometimes it's a hash, sometimes it's whatever it is. But again, nonetheless, here we can see that it is another just a flag hashed. And that's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the box. That's Mr. Robot. It's super fun. I highly recommend downloading it and going through from start to finish, playing around with the website, running all the commands that we saw from interacting with the application. There's a lot of good clips. There's a ton of exploration. There's a ton of other tools that you can run for enumeration. This, again, is the kind of direct approach out of everything that I've tried. So again, I just want to thank everyone for joining me, and happy hacking. And I'll see everyone hopefully on the Slacks